Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, August 5th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 592 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we are recapping day number 11 of New York Jets training camp. As always, we will give you my biggest takeaways from what took place on the field out at One Jets Drive in Florham Park, and we'll also take a listen to some sound later on as Aaron Glenn and Justin Fields met the media after practice today. So we'll get to that later on. The New York Jets will have a day off tomorrow, and then they'll be back on the practice field in front of fans on Thursday, and I will be in attendance, so cannot wait to get back out to One Jets Drive on Thursday, and I will provide you, obviously, with all of my in-person takeaways. But before any of that, we got to get to what took place today out at One Jets Drive, practice number 11 for the New York Jets, another day closer to the preseason opener Saturday night in Lambeau against the Green Bay Packers. And it was more of the same today for the New York Jets on the practice field, as it was another difficult, another choppy, out of sync, just overall a rough practice for the offense. And that has now been the case really for 3 days in a row, right? You go back to last week, Friday was one of their best practices of training camp. Justin Fields specifically was excellent on Friday. You then go to Saturday, the green and white scrimmage. It was a bumpy practice. Fields wasn't great. There was a ton of penalties. Day off Sunday. And you followed that up yesterday with another out of sync, rough practice for the offense. Not as bad as it was on Saturday, but still not good enough. And then you go out there today, and it was more of the same. There's been a lot of struggles. There's a lot of growing pains right now. I am still in the boat of not to panic. I know a lot of Jet fans, I'm sure, are. It is still just August 5th. There is still a lot more time to go. There is preseason games coming up. You'll have your joint practices against the Giants next week. So there is still a lot of room here and a lot of time here for this New York Jets team to continue to iron out some of these kinks. And as I always say with training camp, and I said this to open up yesterday's program, there's a lot of things that Justin Fields is doing in this practice that probably won't be done in games, right? There's a lot of plays that are probably being set up where they're asking him to just stay in the pocket and let plays develop. In a lot of these game scenarios, he would probably be able to take off and run. So you have to also take that into account when you want to put context to the situation, but you do want to start to see some improvement. There's no doubt. And over the next couple weeks here, over the next really week specifically, when they face the Giants, you want to start to see them get back on track here, obviously, sooner rather than later. And I also don't think it all can be pinned on Justin Fields. There does seem to be some struggles here with the wide receivers outside of Garrett Wilson, which does, kind of pop up as a bit of a concern because we knew that going into training camp, and you really haven't seen many guys quite emerge. Even Josh Reynolds, who had a strong start, left with the ankle on Saturday, was back out there today, or left practice, not with an ankle, but left practice with an injury on Saturday, was back out there today. But you are seeing a lot of question marks in that wide receiver room. So you also can't pin it all on Justin Fields because there's been some drops. There's been some penalties. It's been a mixed bag. It's been the offense as a whole. So let's break it down. Start off with team drills. I mentioned the penalties. That was another issue today for this Jets team, and that's going to be an issue this summer. And you want it to be an issue now rather than when the regular season begins, because this is a Jets team, of course, that has been the most penalized team in the NFL the last 2 years. And that's how things started today. 10 men were on the field to open up practice. So that was a penalty. And then there was a false start the very next play. So 2 penalties in a row. You had back-to-back 1-yard Breece Hall runs. Luckily, Breece Hall is okay. He actually left practice, but then ended up coming back. So nothing major there. But that's how the first set began. And then it was an incompletion to Tyler Johnson, Brandon Stevens with a pass breakup. So a couple of penalties, couple of runs that didn't go anywhere, and an incompletion and a bumpy start for the first team offense. You move on to the second set of team drills. Fields was able to find Garrett Wilson for a modest gain, quick gain to open things up there. Then had a bad pass, followed that up with a bad pass to Breeland Allen, which was intercepted by Andre Sisco. So that was one of the first rough passes, head-scratching plays of the day from Justin Fields, as he had 2 other interceptions, 1 other in 11-on-11 drills, and also 1 during 7-on-7, which we'll get to here in a second. Team drills moved on, continued to roll on, I should say. Incomplete to Garrett Wilson in the near sideline, then had another incompletion to Garrett Wilson underneath. Looked like he might have been targeting someone else, so kind of tough to tell whether it was actually intended for Garrett Wilson, but either way, not a great ball and didn't end up in a receiver's hands. So that's how that set of team drills ended. So interception, couple penalties, moral of the story, out of sync again. You move on to some of the 7-on-7 drills, and it was a rough one for Fields. He went just 1 of 4 with an interception. He started it off with an interception to Tony Adams. It was intended for Josh Reynolds. Sauce actually batted it up in the air, and it went into Tony Adams' arms. He then had another incompletion to Josh Reynolds, which was a Sauce pass breakup, an incompletion to Arian Smith on an overthrow, so not a great ball, overthrowing the speedy Arian Smith downfield, and then a completion to Garrett to close things out for about 10 yards. So finished a little bit strong there, but all in all, bumpy in the 7-on-7 drills, with the main takeaway being that Tony Adams interception. Now, some of the drive the field drills. It was interesting from a drive the field perspective because there was 2 sets of drive the field drills where the Jets had some things going, but mistakes late in the drive kind of plagued them. So they started off in the first set of drive the field drills with a Breeland Allen run to the left side behind Olu Fashanu. I think we can all get used to that, Jets fans, opening up a hole there behind Breeland Allen, who had his best practice today, definitely since returning from the knee soreness, which is a positive sign. Fields then had a completion of Stone Smart. He continues to put together a good couple of practices. That has now been 3 to 4 good practices in a row as he starts to emerge here as we kind of get to the dog days of summer. That was about 20 to 25 yards and was one of the examples of Engstrand kind of just scheming him open. Stone Smart found a soft spot in the defense. Fields saw him, fired it over to him. A nice play, something that you like to see. However, then he had back-to-back incompletions, and he followed that up with an interception to Brandon Stevens, which was intended for Jeremy Ruckert. Bit of a high throw, a play that Jeremy Ruckert should make, went through his hands into the arms of Brandon Stevens. Something that can't happen. Yes, the throw wasn't great, but a play that Ruckert probably should make. A play that a starting level tight end should make in this league. And a drive that had some positives, had the nice play to Stone Smart, you had the good run to Breeland Allen, you're moving the football a bit, and boom, you throw an interception. Drive ends. You move on to another set of drive the field drills here for the New York Jets. Had a quick completion to Jeremy Ruckert for 4 yards. Then a quick screen to Breece that didn't go anywhere. And on 3rd and 6, he takes a sack from Michael Clemens, or a what would be sack in a real game from Michael Clemens. So nothing going on that drive the field drive or portion of the practice. And then finally here, the third set of drive the field, as Glenn mentioned earlier in this week, they are doing a lot more reps, A lot more drive the field, which is a good thing. That's much more of a scrimmage-like environment where you're moving the football and all that good stuff. You actually have downs, not just staying in the same spot every single play. Started out with a completion to Jeremy Ruckert. It was short. Then an incompletion to Garrett Wilson. Nice play by Michael Carter, who has quietly had a very strong summer. And that's a big positive because this is a guy who, of course, was dealing with the injuries last year, had a bit of a down year, but I have high expectations for him this season, especially in a defense that should run a lot of man coverage. He then followed that incompletion up from Garrett Wilson to a completion to Garrett Wilson for a short first down. Allen Lazard had a drop. Can't happen. And unfortunately has happened a couple times this training camp. He's been a non-factor. Had the drop and then a sack by Rashad Weaver. And that turns into a 3rd and 23 situation where Fields had to scramble for about 5 yards, drive ends. So a couple sacks, couple drops, couple missed throws. Rough day again. Just a bit out of sync. And again, I'm not in the panic phase. You shouldn't be in the panic phase on August 5th. But over time here, you do want to see this start to get a bit better. And I also think people have to remind it's not all on Justin Fields either. I know a lot of people want to point to Justin Fields and said, oh, he stinks, which is ridiculous to make that conclusion on August 5th. But sure, he's had his fair share of bad throws and plays that he should have made. But there's also other things that are happening, right? There's been some sacks. There's been some penalties. And there's been some drops. And even the interception he had to Brandon Stevens, a play that Jeremy Ruckert should probably make. Right? So you also have to bring that into the context of the situation. One more set of drills here. The Jets did an end-of-game drill. So 13 seconds left at the 43-yard line, down 23-20 with no timeouts. Fields took the ball, ran it up the middle, and when he tried to clock it, there was a penalty on Breece Hall because he wasn't back at the line of scrimmage in time. So another one of those just messy plays that you got to get cleaned up here the rest of the way here in summer, something that obviously can't happen in a real game scenario. And as we always say, you'd rather that happen now than week 1 against the Steelers or any game in the regular season for that matter. So all in all, Fields ended the day 9 of 17, 2 interceptions during 11-on-11 drills. Those 2 interceptions were to Brandon Stevens and Andre Sisco, and he had 1 interception in 7-on-7 drills. That, of course, was in the hands of Tony Adams. He also took 3 sacks. So the last 3 practices in total for Fields. And again, this is training camp stats. Take it as you will. You got to put context to the situation, as I've said many times today. But 15 of 43, 2 interceptions. That's a 34% completion percentage. So no doubt it's been a struggle the last 3 days. There's still time here for this offense to continue to mesh and continue to grow and get better and start to stack much better days than we've seen so far. Couple Brady Cook notes I want to throw out there because he got a decent amount of run today with Tyrod still not practicing, which we'll get to the injury updates here a bit later on when we hear from Aaron Glenn. But he had a couple nice plays today. I'll just throw this out here. 11-on-11 drills. He had a nice completion to Jamal Pritchett, 20 yards downfield, nice throw. He also had a nice completion to Breeland Allen. Breeland Allen with about 30-plus yards of rack. So took it upfield and got a decent chunk of yards after the catch. And then he also had a nice completion down the sideline to Ontario Wilson. And the reason I bring up Cook is obviously Breeland Allen got involved from him, but Jamal Pritchett as well, roster bubble wide receiver that could make this team potentially not just from a receiver perspective, but you look at special teams, punt returning perspective, somebody to watch for in these preseason games, who's had a good, solid training camp, in my opinion. So that's the quarterbacks. That's the overall view of the offense and really what took place during the drills. Just some other offensive notes. Like I said, Breeland Allen, few nice runs today. Also had a couple nice receptions. By far his best day since coming back from the knee soreness. This was a guy that Saturday's green and white scrimmage didn't practice a ton, was very limited. You could tell a lot more reps for Isaiah Davis. Yesterday, same thing. Not a ton of reps from a Breeland Allen perspective. But today, you saw kind of what you were seeing prior to missing a few days with the knee soreness. So that's a good sign. Isaiah Davis also had a good run today, about 10-plus yards upfield. Another example of Davis with his decisiveness and his vision. He made a nice cut upfield and picked up about 10 yards, and we've seen that a lot from Isaiah Davis, that ability to find the hole, cut upfield, and make his move, and that's something that in games can really benefit him. And he continues to be a guy that I continue to say, watch out for, even though he's listed as the number 3 and all the talk is around Breeland Allen and Breece Hall. Isaiah Davis is going to make an impact for this team in 2025. Donovan Edwards also had a touchdown today in the red zone. So figured I'd throw that out there as well. Wide receivers wise, Lazard had the drop. Of course, Garrett had a couple receptions. Jamal Pritchett had that big completion. A big opportunity here for Pritchett just over these next couple practices, Thursday and even in the preseason game, to continue to prove himself. But also with Gibson out with the injury, this is an opportunity for him to try and make the most of these reps and start to separate himself a bit more than maybe he already has, or make a stronger case than he has so far, though I think he's made a pretty strong case already. I throw another name out here, and again, just from a receiving perspective, these last couple practices, you've really started to see some of the concerns pop up of, if Garrett Wilson's not open, if he's not there, who else? It's some of these other receivers haven't quite emerged yet. You had the Lazard drop. Josh Reynolds today didn't do a whole lot. He's been somebody that Fields has looked his way a lot. Today, there wasn't much of a connection there. And I throw Tyler Johnson out there too, who's in a bit of a rut now, I would say. This is a guy who I thought got off to a very good start in training camp, and I still think there's a good chance he's this team's wide receiver 3. But as you've seen these struggles over the last couple days happen, Tyler Johnson's also kind of been thrown in the mix of, he's now had a couple quiet practices in a row. And I'm not throwing this out here to say panic time, but I think it just goes along the lines of, if Garrett's not open, if that connection isn't hot during the practice, there's been some times here where you're starting to see some of these receivers behind him just not quite emerge yet. Tyler Johnson was on that trajectory of, did a lot of things really well, and now he's plateaued a bit. And you'd like to see him on Thursday, and then ultimately against the joint practices, some of those guys start to find some success again in that wide receiver room, because it's one of the big question marks. From a tight end perspective, Stone Smart had the big reception. That was one of the highlights of the offense today. Really nice play design. Good job by Fields seeing Stone Smart. And with Mason Taylor out with the high ankle sprain, which we'll get to here more in a little bit, Stone Smart's a guy that's going to get a lot more opportunities. He's somebody that's really started to come along here and quietly has put together a very strong summer. And Jeremy Ruckert, I mentioned the ball that went through his hands, a play that he should make. He did have a couple other short completions, but all in all, Stone Smart has definitely had a better training camp than Jeremy Ruckert. And I really think Stone Smart quietly here is carving out a role to be a guy that can provide some receiving production for this team this season. And you obviously want to see him in the preseason and joint practices and all that stuff. But he's definitely shown a lot more than Ruckert. And if he can be a nice surprise, a nice receiving option behind Mason Taylor that you didn't really know what you were getting out of him when you signed him, if he can kind of emerge, it's a nice bonus for this Jets offense, who can use anybody to be a pass catcher with some receiving upside on this team. And I mentioned a couple of the nice runs behind Olu, the biggest coming from Breeland Allen to open up practice. You've seen a lot of those outside runs from from Tanner Engstrand and this offensive staff so far, which has been a bit different than what we saw, previous regime. A lot of it was the vanilla up the middle run concepts, and they're not giving away obviously everything, but you have seen a lot of outside the tackles type of runs, and they've been successful. The rushing offense, that's the one thing. Even through these bad days of offense, the rushing offense continues to stand out. Fields himself, he's obviously had a couple run plays himself that has produced some big yards, even a touchdown on Saturday with his legs. That's going to be the bread and butter for this offense. From a defensive perspective, Rashad Weaver, I mentioned, had the sack. Michael Clemens had a sack. Clemens actually hasn't had a bad summer. I still don't have much faith in him, but he is somebody that could have easily went out there this training camp and been terrible and been a non-factor. But there's been a couple practices where he's made a couple plays, and Rashad Weaver as well. He has also had a strong summer so far. He's had a couple sacks now, and that's, I think, a positive thing because we talk about it all the time. Jermaine Johnson, ease him back into it the first couple weeks. You're going to need some guys to emerge behind him. Rashad Weaver is a name to look for. Clemens as well, still on this roster. He's somebody that you hope you can get something out of. So good days for those guys. And in the secondary, had a big day. Tony Adams had the pick. Andre Cisco pick. Brandon Stevens pick. Cisco and Stevens have also had very good training camps. Stevens also had a pass breakup on Tyler Johnson, and he just continues to just do so well this summer. And it's such a nice surprise to see that this was a guy that was brought in, and the minute he was signed, very polarizing pick amongst the signing amongst the fan base, of course. And, you know, this is a player who had some struggles in Baltimore, but this coaching staff obviously saw something in him, and entering his first training camp already felt like he was on the hot seat, and he didn't even play a game. Didn't even have a practice with the team. You know, he had the rough spring. You went into training camp. He's been a real nice surprise, and you really start to think of the potential of the secondary if Brandon Stevens makes the necessary improvements, which he's shown he has been able to do, plus Sauce Gardner, who has had an excellent camp, and the last 2 days he's been excellent as well, and Michael Carter as well, who's also had a strong camp. You get real excited for what this secondary can do. Mentioning Sauce, he had the pass breakup against Josh Reynolds. He also had the deflection on the Tony Adams interception. And I mentioned Michael Carter earlier having the pass breakup on Garrett Wilson. So the secondary's been all over the field these last couple of days. And certainly have played a role in this pass offense, stalling a bit here the last couple of practices. Couple notes on some tackling drills and some O-line, D-line drills, because they did more of those today. Quincy Williams had a big hit on Malachi Corley, which forced a fumble on him. As each day goes by, you really start to just wonder how Malachi Corley makes this team. He has not had a good camp. Not necessarily a bad camp, just hasn't done really anything well. And today, that was not good. Now, it did seem like he won another rep when he got another chance, but still, tackling drills, one-on-one, open field against Quincy Williams, getting hit and fumbling is not a good thing to try and boost your stock to make this roster. As each day goes by, his chances, it seems less and less likely, but who knows? He's still got preseason games. We'll see what happens there. Dymere Miller beat Quantez Stiggers on a nice stiff arm, so that's a under-the-radar roster battle there between, some depth pieces there. O-line, D-line drills. AVT stopped Jay Tufele. Olu put up a wall against Tyler Barron, and Joe Tittman won his battle against Leonard Taylor. So all in all, the offensive line definitely won the O-line, D-line drills, which is a good thing because this is an offensive line that's had a pretty good summer so far, especially from a run blocking perspective. So that's what took place on the field today out in Florham Park. Now we get to some comments made by head coach Aaron Glenn and quarterback Justin Fields, who also met the media. We'll start with Aaron Glenn here. Here are the latest injury updates for the New York Jets.
On the injury front, we had about 5 guys of note that I want to make sure I talk about. First is Byron Coward. He has an ankle injury. He did that in the endo. AZ trying to break up a pass. He fell on the shoulder. Will in endo had back spasms. All right, so further evaluation on that. Mason Taylor has an high ankle, so he'll be out this week. And Tyrod actually has a knee. All right, and we're still evaluating him. So we'll see how those injuries are, and I'll get back with you guys and make sure I give you more information on that. But that's for today.
So those are the latest injury updates. Byron Cowart, of course, left on the cart, ankle. A.Z. Thomas landed on shoulder. Will McDonald, back spasms. Tyrod with the knee. Mason Taylor, high ankle. And Brees, as I mentioned, left but came back. The Mason Taylor high ankle sprain, not what you want from a rookie. You want him out there, but, a week, hopefully he can get back either way, as long as, of course, he's ready for the season. Will McDonald, you hope nothing major there, just some back spasms. Seems like something that he could return from pretty soon. And Byron Cowart, with the ankle, you hope he can get back relatively soon as well. He's had a nice camp and feels like the front runner to pair next to Quinn Williams on that defensive line, who, of course, is dealing with the calf injury himself. Now, more on the Mason Taylor injury. This was Aaron Glenn on if he's concerned about him missing time here with the high ankle.
With Mason, we've talked a lot about the acclimation from college to the NFL for tight ends and how challenging it can be. If he's going to miss a few weeks here with the high ankle sprain, is that a little alarming that he's going to be, I know he's still going to be in meetings, but he's going to be missing some valuable time on the field?
Well, you guys are the one that said it was challenging. I never said that. He's a damn good player. He has the pedigree of playing that, of being just an NFL player because of his dad. So I think he's going to be just fine. I'm not worried about that player at all.
Another little battle with the media there from Glenn, going after that question. But yeah, I agree. He's had a strong camp and he's still going to be in meetings. And you obviously want him out there, but ultimately it's get ready for week one. And in a perfect world, he misses a week or two. And let's say he comes back and he could play the final preseason game or whatever, get the couple final days of camp in. He's still going to be in meetings. Something there that Glenn clearly not too worried about his tight end in Mason Taylor. So that's the latest on the injury front. Glenn also talked about just the dog days of training camp and reps going up. Here was his thoughts on where things stand this summer.
Dog days of camp. And listen, it's not fun for anybody, but it's necessary. And our guys went out there and got a good amount of reps today. And practice was built to be that way. And we're going to continue to do that because we got to get our guys ready to play 65 or 70 plays a game. So as we continue to training camp, you're going to see us progress as far as reps are concerned. I said that early in the week, and our guys know that. And we're going to continue to fight and make sure that we get ourselves calloused and ready for the first week. So there was a number of situations that we had today. I thought our defense was outstanding early in practice. Our offense wasn't up to par. And then once we got to the move the ball situation, I thought our offense did a really good job of getting the ball down the field. So
excited to be out there Thursday just from this perspective of lots of reps. See a lot of action there. And you've seen a lot more of that with Glenn. The reps go up this week, yesterday, and even today. And I think something I've liked what Glenn is doing, a lot more drive the field drills. He mentioned that just there. And I think that's something that's definitely important. And I think drive the field drills, you're able to take more away from them because it's more of a scrimmage in-game environment as opposed to just standing there at the 25 and throwing passes or running the ball and going back to the 25. You really can kind of get a grasp of how things look and go through a scrimmage-like feel. So reps are going up, and this training camp continues to be much different from what we saw under Robert Saleh. This was Glenn on what he saw from Justin Fields today.
Aaron touched on the offense, but what specifically did you see out of Justin today in the snaps?
Well, there's a number of things. Again, as far as the way his command was of the offense and know exactly what to do was outstanding. Some of his throws wasn't on point, all right? But, again, a lot of them were on point, and guys got to make plays for him too. So that kind of showed up today. And we got to get ready to fix those things. So it goes hand in hand with quarterback and receivers. He has to deliver the ball, and they have to catch it.
He's correct, and Glenn's said that now a couple days in a row. Look, Fields has certainly had his fair share of missed throws, but there's also a fair share of drops in there that you have to talk about, and you have to put into the conversation as well when you talk about this offensive struggles. And that is something, too, from a pass-catching standpoint. Does this team have enough behind Garrett Wilson? And I also think you could throw into the conversation Mason Taylor has now missed the last two practices, and they've struggled. And Mason Taylor, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, you expect to be your top guys. Mason Taylor out, you want to see somebody else start to emerge. I know Stone Smart's done some good things here, but you've now seen, a couple quiet practices now from Reynolds, Tyler Johnson. Things move on here. Somebody's got to start to emerge. And if not, maybe you look at the open market. Gabe Davis, how does that all play out? Do you bring in another receiver? Who knows? But Glenn has said that a lot of Fields has certainly had some bad throws. He knows he needs to work on stuff, and he's been honest with that, but also recognizing the guys around him. One other thing with Aaron Glenn, very happy with what he's seen from this secondary, specifically Brandon Stevens.
Listen, those guys have been doing a hell of a job. I already called B. Stevens out. I think he's probably one of our most improved players right now. You watch Sauce. Sauce is going to get his hands on the ball. He's going to cover well. Cisco's a guy that's going to get his hands on the ball. He probably gets his hands on the ball more than I thought he would. But he did that in Syracuse, and he did that in the NFL as far as picking the ball off. So I'm not surprised with that. TA is doing a really good job of handling all the movements in the back end and make sure everybody's lined up. MC2 is doing a really good job at the nickel spot. The thing is, he's a really good tackler. I know people look at his size, but he's a tough guy, and he doesn't back down from anything. So even our backups, like those guys are doing a really good job too. And it all comes down, they understand exactly what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And to me, I think that's easy. It makes it easy for defense in general for those guys to go out there and play fast.
Secondary has been a big positive, no doubt. And Glenn talked about it there, listed all the guys, Stevens, Sauce, Michael Carter as well. And Stevens being one of the most improved. Stevens is an early example of this coaching staff finding a player that they like, that on the outside has a lot to work on and doesn't look great. And he's looked good. And they're getting a lot more out of him than what we saw in Baltimore. And a lot of the struggles you saw in Baltimore, you're not seeing right now, which is a big thing as the season gets closer. And Sauce is Sauce. And Michael Carter, if he's healthy, I said that earlier, I think he's going to have a big year. So that was Glenn. Now moving on to Justin Fields. He also met the media. Looking forward to trying to bounce back on Thursday. Here was Fields.
It's a great opportunity to see, how we're going to respond on Thursday. So, like I said, it's inevitable. You're going to have these days in training camp. That's why we're out here. That's why we're out here working. And, defense, they won the day at the end of the day. So, like I said, it's about how we respond on Thursday, and we got to come out hot.
He's correct. Want to start to see this offense stack up some good days consistently. It's been 3 bad days now. You get the day off tomorrow, practice on Thursday. Let's see something positive out of the offense. And then more importantly, joint practices next week. Let's start to see some more growth from an offensive perspective, and these struggles start to go to the side a bit more. In terms of Fields and some of the weapons he's got around him, very high expectations for Breece Hall. Here was Fields on Breece and what he can do.
Yeah, that's what I was saying to you guys in OTAs. Breece's hands, when I first got here, they surprised me. So, I saw a highlight from him from the Tennessee game last year and that touchdown that he caught. So, you get to practice with him and working with him. You can tell which guys have natural hands and stuff like that. But he had a amount of catches yesterday where he was, whether it was from the receiver spot, the slot, or the backfield, coming out of the backfield and catching the ball. So, it's a great weapon to have, and I'm pretty sure we're going to utilize him in that way. So.
It's a nice change, utilizing the running back, something that the previous coaching staff could not do, not only on the ground, but, of course, as receiving threats out of the backfield. And with the way this Jets team's structured, you look at Breece as potentially the second highest receiver on this team if all goes as planned. One more thing from Justin Fields, his thoughts on potentially playing in the preseason and why he thinks it's a good thing.
In an era where some quarterbacks don't play in the preseason, just how comfortable do you feel like? How do you feel like? How many games do you feel like you need to play in preseason or snaps?
I think we at least need to see the field each and every game. I think that'll be good for our team. It'll be good for Tanner getting that in-game stuff. It'll be good for me, the guys on offense. I don't think I know some guys they sit out the whole preseason, but I don't think that's the case with us. Just because of the new team, new offense and stuff like that. So I don't. That's kind of how I feel about the situation. So.
I expect Fields to play and the starters to play Giants and in the Eagles game. Now, Glenn did mention yesterday that he's still, in terms of the starters, he'll have an answer later in the week. So we should hear an answer from Glenn on Thursday, because that's the next time and final time he'll meet the media before they play on Saturday, because they also have a day off on Friday before the game. So only one practice before Thursday's preseason game. So point is, we'll hear on Thursday whether or not they're playing, most likely, assuming Glenn tells the media at that point. I don't think they'll play against Green Bay, but it's something to keep an eye on. And Fields kind of hinted there, playing each preseason game. He likes that idea. So we'll see what happens there, if they play, if they don't play. Just keep an eye on that. But I think you fully expect them. You get the 2 joint practices against the Giants, get some snaps in against the Giants in the preseason game and in the Eagles. Definitely see that. Green Bay, maybe. But I don't think it'll be the case, but definitely something to keep an eye on. And look, it'll be a good thing, I think, for this offense to get some reps in the preseason, especially, he mentioned Engstrand. Game reps, totally different than training camp reps and going against your same team. And from a Fields perspective, this entire offense, learning a new offense, new quarterback, all this stuff, lots of new pieces. You want to see what they look like in a game environment and get some reps in a game environment. So we'll see. So that'll do it. Another episode in the books. Appreciate you all so much for tuning in. Another training camp recap here. Down day number 11. Training camp is flying by. We've already kind of hit the dog days, as Glenn mentioned in today's press conference. Tomorrow we'll have a player preview episode up as always, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that'll be up tomorrow morning. And then Thursday will be the next camp practice. I'll obviously have a recap after that. I'll be in person for that one, out at One Jets Drive. So I'll have all my in-person takeaways. So looking forward to that. And in preseason game Saturday, football's here, a couple days away. Jets play a football game. How about that? Get excited. So that'll do it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts on today's training camp practice? Any other Jets takes you got, let me know down below. And until next time, JETS. Jets, Jets, Jets.